Well, I'm so glad that you're able to join us over here. This is a very special room, and Elaine Didier, who will be speaking to you today, will be able to explain more about this room and the exhibits, and she also has agreed to talk about leadership. Now, Elaine is a natural to address the Leadership Academy because she's been a leader in her own right in a number of ways. She got all of her education, I think all of it, basically from 18 on at the University of Michigan and a little bit at Oxford too, and got the PhD at Michigan. So, you know, we say go blue when we're around each other. She also has had considerable experience as a leader in library science. She's been a dean at two universities, the University of Michigan and also at Oakland University in Oakland County. And she has been appointed in a number of government capacities as well. She's been president of the Michigan Library Association, and Governor Engler appointed her to a 3-year term on the Library of Michigan Board of Trustees. She is a leader in her field. And I have to just say, on a personal note, in the fall of 2004, when I first had the opportunity to meet Elaine, I was delighted when we had the opportunity over lunch to talk about the decision that she'd be made to accept the position to be head of the Gerald R. Ford Presidential Library and Museum. It's a very distinguished institution. She has the challenge, unlike any other director of a presidential library, of trying to coordinate events in Ann Arbor over the library portion and the museum over here in Grand Rapids, and she does a splendid job. Everybody knew that it would take somebody with an extremely strong sense of self and mission to be able to come into a job like this. And I think everybody has been thrilled that Elaine has been able to wrangle this institution into a first-class entity in both communities, Ann Arbor and Grand Rapids, but it takes a strong personality to do that, and Elaine has just been brilliant at it. You should also know that the Hauenstein Center partners with the Ford, and I with Elaine on numbers of occasions throughout the year. So many of the programs that you're actually able to take advantage of are joint programs of ours, and she is an outstanding partner. I'm very proud of that partnership, and I'm very proud to go ahead and present in her own home territory here, which makes this introduction especially interesting, but I'm very proud to turn the floor over to you, Elaine, in your home. And thank you for having the Leadership Academy Fellows.
Thanks,
Elaine
thanks
Didier,
very much.
Dr.
Thanks very much. I must say this is the first time I've presided at anything in this room. Isn't this cool? We were debating beforehand whether to stay and have a conversation where we had lunch, because it's a lovely view of the river and of course the gravesite, which means a lot to all of us. But on the other hand, I thought, how often do we have a chance to sit in the cabinet room? So how do those chairs feel? Do you know? Did you see now? Did you know what cabinet secretary you are? You're the Secretary of Agriculture. Okay, see what you are here. Kathy, whoop, that one doesn't have a label. Oh, okay, you're nothing, sorry. Attorney General, you see we go here.
You're Secretary of Transportation.
Look at that. Oh dear. Yeah, you can check your label, check your brand's label. You didn't get a label. Oh dear. Who's got the president? Usually the president's in the middle. It would be you. You're the president. Well, very good. Good selection. That's great. Well, we're glad to have you here. Welcome to the Ford Museum. And as Cleve said, this is only one half of our institution. And so maybe this is a thought, Cleves, we haven't worked on in the past. At some point, maybe in future, for future leadership fellows, we could arrange a bus trip to host you at the Ford Presidential Library. This is only one of 12 presidential libraries in the country, and when you think about not just President Ford, but what presidential libraries have, it would be really wonderful to have a chance to show you not just this side of the house, which is museum, the public side here. This is where we store about 15,000 artifacts in addition to those that are on display in the exhibit. But over at the library are the documents. The history of the Ford administration and the policy decisions is over in Ann Arbor. There we have 21 million pages of documents. in acid-free folders, in acid-free boxes called Hollinger boxes, and we have about 500,000 audiovisual items. And that's where researchers come from around the world for 1, 2, and 3 weeks at a time. We have people come from Grand Valley, people come from other institutions in the United States, Oxford, Australia, you name it, where they're working on not just President Ford, but issues of the time, because basically is what we are, an archive of materials from the inception of Ford's time in Congress, which began in 1948. He was elected 13 times to Congress representing this region. So we have a lot of his congressional papers, we have his vice presidential papers, and of course then the presidential papers. We have the full set of Warren Commission papers, because Ford was on the commission that investigated the assassination of President Kennedy. And so we have all of his notes and materials from that, as well as lots of personal things from the family. So at some point, it would be nice to have you come, and maybe Gleaves and I could collaborate on something where you could actually work with original documents from the administration, handling the then carbon copies. Think about tissue carbons. I mean, we're so used to photocopy machines and all of the other accoutrements of today that we have the original documents. And it's just a wonderful resource and a real way to get a feel for not just President Ford, but for a period of history pretty much from the late 40s, early 50s through his presidency, and then materials beyond. We also have materials from about 400 other people in the administration. So again, it's not just Ford. We have the papers of Melvin Laird, who was Secretary of Defense under Richard Nixon, had been a member of Congress with Ford. We have papers of people whose names you know, like David Gergen, who was an assistant to Don Rumsfeld in that administration. And of course, some papers from Don Rumsfeld. Dick Cheney were young people, very, very young in their roles in the White House at that time. So there are names to conjure with that are pretty amazing, of people who have had full careers in public service. And that's really fascinating to look at. But the talk today is not about, if I were doing a talk, I have a wonderful PowerPoint, kind of a virtual tour of the library and museum, but that's not our topic for today. And I want to open to talk a little bit about leadership from a sort of a general perspective. It's something that has interested me. In fact, Gleaves and I just had a planning meeting for programs coming up, and one of the programs he's bringing in the author of Lincoln on leadership, and I said, oh yes, and here I have the book, because it was one of the ones that I had pulled in my preparation for this talk. But I'm a watcher and observer of leadership in various settings, and also have done a fair bit of speaking about it. But I want to open today with something from an article by David Brooks. This was a column he wrote in the New York Times, June 6th of 2008, and he was talking about comparing Abraham Lincoln and his the depression that he went through as an individual, fighting demons that he felt he wasn't good enough, wasn't strong enough, and went through some very difficult times. And his commentary goes on to talk about the current election without naming any parties, but he said, over the past decades, we've seen president after president confident of his own talents, but then undone by underappreciated flaws. It's as if they get elected for their virtues and then get defined in office by the vices. Clinton's narcissism, Bush's intellectual insecurity, things they've never really faced. It would be nice to have a president who had gone to school on his own failings. Think about this in the light of the process we're going through right now. It would be comforting to see a president who'd looked into the abyss or suffered some sort of ordeal that put him on a first-name basis with his own gravest weaknesses, and who had found ways to combat them. The central illusion of modern politics is that if only people as virtuous as us had power, things would be better. Think about the current situation. Candidates get elected by telling people what they want to hear, leading them by using the sugar of their own fantasies. Somehow a leader conversant with his own failings wouldn't be as affected by the moral self-approval that affects most political movements. He'd be detached from his most fervid followers and merciful and understanding toward foes. He'd have a sense of his own smallness in the sweep of events. He or she would contravene Lord Acton's dictum and grow sadder and wiser with more power. All this suggests for us voters, don't look only to see which candidate has the most talent, look for the one most emotionally gripped by his own failings. Isn't that amazing? Written in June. And I thought, as we talk about leadership, one of the things that I think about is that self-knowledge, that awareness of who one is, and how to put things into a context.